guy's going to be some senator one day.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Jesse Hughes Show, live here in Lynchburg, Virginia. It is so glad to be back. Usually, I take a ceremonial chip from a Cerwine can during this part, but tonight, we're going with the bottle. We are not sponsored by Chairwine. We would love a sponsorship with Chairwine. I drink this stuff religiously. Welcome back. It has been a crazy news week. As you guys, if you watched last week, saw, we were awaiting the upcoming peace talks between President Trump and President Putin of Russia. We will get to that momentarily, but first we've got some big news that happened earlier this week. President Trump has taken federal control of Washington, D.C., and predictably, the entire left has freaked out about this, claiming fascism, claiming dictatorial control. They say that he has lost his mind, that he's out of bounds, that other cities are next. Honestly, I hope so. We will get to that in just a second. But here's what happened. As many of you may know if you pay attention, DC has a insane crime rate. It has been skyrocketing for the last several years. Now, truthfully, as the media has reported, it has faced a small dip in the last year or so. There's been a small decrease in the crime. But the crime rate is still crazy. It's still out of control. It's the fourth most dangerous city, I think, in the world, is what the statistic that I saw floating around earlier this week said. It is a mess in DC right now. And so Trump did what I think was the right decision. He announced that from this point forward, the federal government would be taking command of the DC Police Department, and that he would be deploying the National Guard to assist in efforts to clean up the streets and deal with the crime problem. Now, there is precedent for this. This is not just some unprecedented move that Trump decided to make on his own. DC was in federal control for most of the nation's history until Congress passed the Home Rule Act, which gave it, control to a mayor and a city council like a conventional city. We can debate whether or not that was a mistake. I tend to lean that it might have been a mistake. I don't know if that was the best move. But within the Home Rule Act, there is a provision that the president can still take federal control of the city if the situation calls for it, and the situation, in my opinion, definitely called for it. I remember, if you followed me for a while, you may remember I have done two internships in Washington, D.C. during my time as an undergraduate student at Liberty University. In the summer of 2022, I was an intern for the House Judiciary Committee for the Republican staff. In the summer of 2023, I was an intern for Congressman Dan Bishop from the great state of North Carolina, who is now working as the Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget in the White House. D.C., during that time, it was a mess. Now, around the Capitol, where my apartment was and where I worked, yes, it was a little less crazy because, you had the Capitol Police. It was a nicer area. But there were still things about it that made me go, wait a second, this is supposed to be the capital of the greatest city in the world. What are we doing here? What's going on? This doesn't seem like it should be okay. And if you've ever been to Union Station especially, you know that especially was crazy. Union Station, I remember, there were homeless everywhere. There were encampments everywhere. You had people sitting on the sidewalks, sleeping on the sidewalks, sleeping in tents. It was very unsafe. It was borderline disgusting. Actually, it was quite disgusting. It was not a good area to be in. And around the city, as you got further and further into the city, things were worse, honestly. There were parts of the city that I did not feel safe in even during the day, much less I would, God forbid, I went out at night. I would never go out at night in some of those places. I remember even being on the metro as a young 20-year-old intern, turning, and I looked. I'm on the metro. I'm riding home one night after an event. I turn and look, and there is a man sitting in a seat a couple rows back from me with a shiesty on, or if you know what that is. He had on a camouflage jacket that had the sleeves cut out. He had a red tourniquet around his arm, and he was putting a mysterious substance that I think we all might have a guess of what it was onto a spoon. I watched a man prepare to do drugs right in front of me, plain out in the open, like nothing was wrong with it, like nobody cared. Yeah, DC was a mess. It still is, from what I hear from friends that are still up there. And so Trump, in his power, decided, you know what, I'm going to do something about this because the capital of the United States, the capital of the greatest country on earth, should not be a hellhole. It should not be this unsafe, disgusting place that nobody wants to go visit. If you're a foreign dignitary and you come to the nation's capital and your first impression is homeless guys on the street and random dudes shooting heroin on the metro, that is a problem. That is not a good first impression for the city, for the nation's capital, or for the nation at large. I remember in his press conference, Trump, or in a different press conference on the matter, Trump made an allusion. He made a metaphor looking back to a story that he heard when he was in the real estate business saying, you know, if you go into a kitchen, if you go into a restaurant and the front door is dirty, you don't want to eat there because it's a pretty good indicator that the rest of the restaurant is probably pretty dirty as well. If they can't even clean up their front door, what are they doing to the rest of the place? And the same thing goes for the nation. If we can't clean up our front door, our capital, the gateway to this country, what kind of impression do you think that leaves on the rest of the nation? Not a good one. I can tell you that right now. And so Trump did what Trump does, and he declared that he's taking federal control. And now you've got all these people freaking out, saying that this is a fascist move, that it's setting bad precedent, that it's dictatorial control, and that he's going to do this to other cities. Let me just say this right out in the open. I don't know if he has the authority to do this, but I really don't care. I hope he does it to other cities. My hometown is 40 minutes away from Charlotte. Charlotte's not the best place ever right now. I have friends that live in Nashville. Nashville is better than most, but still not the best place right now. I saw Todd Starnes talking about Memphis. Memphis is definitely not the best place right now. My fiance's family lives in Houston. I visited Houston. I went to an Astros game. The area around Astros Stadium makes me nervous. We have very, very out of control crime problems in many of our cities across the nation. And I hope that Trump is willing to step up and do something about it, not just in our nation's capital, but in the other cities as well, because this is insane. It's out of control. This is just not something that is sustainable. And if we allow this to go on, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. We got to nip it in the bud right now while we can. This is not something we should allow to continue. I saw a video earlier today of someone who was streaming in DC, who was walking around DC. They arrested a drug dealer off the side of the street. And naturally, you have your typical leftist woman walking up and starts screaming into her megaphone, like guttural screaming. Like if you listen to heavy metal music, it sounded like a heavy metal song. Like she was screaming with such intensity into this megaphone, like, F you! You need to go home. You don't belong here. Fascist, fascist, This has to be mental illness. Somebody like some people, some people, I think, are arguing in good faith, and they have legitimate concerns about the balance of power and this and that. And some people are just mentally ill. Some of these people are just mentally ill, and we do not have the proper means to take care of these people. 50 years ago we had insane asylums, and you didn't have these crazy people out here on the streets screaming in the megaphones talking about fascism and this and that and the other. 50 years ago we had that. Now we don't have that, and look what you have. You have people screaming profanities in public on megaphones. It is it is insane to see. And I mean, I've seen stuff like this up close and personal. I've been to protests and things of that nature. I've seen this behavior up close and personal. Many of you know I was in DC when the Dobbs decision was handed down. I have never felt as much spiritual darkness and as much and observed signs of mental illness and probably what was likely demonic oppression upon people as when I did when Dobbs got handed down and Roe v. Wade was overturned. We have a huge problem in this country, and this is getting way off topic, but I don't care. I'm still going to delve into this. We have a huge problem in this country with people that are A, mentally ill, B, demonically oppressed, or C, both. And we do not have the proper means as a country right now to deal with these people and to give them the hope and care that they need. Obviously, we have people who are out preaching the gospel on the streets every day. God bless those people. We have some people who are actually taking this mental health crisis seriously and trying to provide legitimate help, not just these psychiatrists that say, well, if you think happy thoughts and if you pump yourself with enough of these drugs, then yes, you're gonna eventually get to a place where no, that's no, 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 no. Just stop. Just stop it right there. That is no. That's not gonna work. And it's the same thing with crime. Pulling this back to crime. We are in a place right now where a lot of people who are some are well-meaning and some have more nefarious motives are saying that the best way to deal with crime is just to restorative justice and to treat these people with respect and the dignity that they deserve. And like, listen, I get all those arguments. But here's the thing. Restorative justice works in some circumstances, but there also, for some crimes, has to be punishment. There has to be punishment. You can't just go along say coddling everybody and saying, well, if we just treat them with enough love and care and respect, then they won't want to commit crimes anymore. Some people that might work. I've seen some success stories, maybe, but for the most part, if you've got a guy out here who has grown up on the streets, doesn't have a father figure in his life, has grown up around a certain culture his entire life, and has been ingrained in drugs, sex, money, and killing people that are trying to this like epidemic of gang violence. That's not coddling them is not going to make them stop. At some point you have to put the hammer down. And that's what Trump's trying to do with DC. By federalizing it, taking control, and saying, no, we're done with this. We've had enough. We're not dealing with this anymore. We're going to actually have law enforcement out here doing the things that need to be done and getting these people off our streets who don't belong on the streets at all. You're actually going to get something done. You're actually going to have results. You're actually going to have safety in society. Some people like to think that, if we just all agree to have this mythical non-aggression principle, I'm talking to you libertarians, if you have this mythical non-aggression principle that somehow people are going to start respecting each other's rights and respecting each other's property. Listen, I get ideally, maybe that would be nice, but we live in a fallen world full of all sorts of depravity. Listen, I believe in the sovereignty of God. I believe in Calvinism. I know some people who follow me aren't Calvinist. I know some of you might not even know what I'm talking about. That's a different discussion for a different day. I also believe in total depravity and the total depravity of man. And let me tell you something. Crime tends to prove that depravity is a really, really real thing. And the depths of some of the depravity that we see in our cities, in our communities, because of things like letting this crime problem get out of control and through mass migration in many cases as well, the depravity runs rampant. And it's not going to stop unless either somebody has a radical change that can come through the transformation of the gospel, which for some of these people might happen and for others it might not, or you get police to actually do their jobs. And while we're on the subject, just for the record, I know there are some people who talk about the gospel like it's this thing that all this, like, yes, it wipes your sin clean in the eyes of God. However, biblically, we know as well that just because your sins are forgiven doesn't mean you lose the consequences of your actions here on earth. If you are a murderer and all of a sudden you repent and turn to Christ, yes, your sins are forgiven. However, you are still going to jail for murder. And if we're following the biblical penalty, you are probably going to lose your life as well. So, crime, this level of violent crime needs a strong response. I mean, look what happened in El Salvador under Nayib Bukele. It got a strong response. He said, "We're not putting up with this anymore." And El Salvador went from being one of the most dangerous countries in the world to the safest in South America. The only reason this problem has gotten to as far and as bad as it has, people like to blame blue city Democrats who are soft on crime. And yes, that is an issue. And yes, that is something we need to address. And yes, that is something that I wish the people of these places would stop voting for. However, we also have to address the fact that conservatives are allergic to power. Power used responsibly is actually a good thing. I know some people don't want to hear that. I know some people think that, power is bad. All power corrupts no matter what. Power is this dirty word that we shouldn't. That's not true. Sometimes power is good, and sometimes power can be used for good. And I think absolving your country, or at least the capital city of your country, of a humongous violent crime problem is a good use of power. I don't know who was advising Donald Trump in 2020, but if he would have had the same people in his cabinet and in his circle as he does now, it's likely the summer of love, as they called it, wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have seen cities being burned to the ground. We wouldn't have seen violent mobs running rampant. We wouldn't have seen all these things that are ingrained into our brain now, all these protests turned into violent riots. We wouldn't have seen any of that because somebody in the room would have understood actually power is a good thing if you use it responsibly, and they would have used it responsibly. You wouldn't have had to deal with this issue. And yes, you would have still had your usual leftists crying in the streets. And given the political situation of 2020 and where most of the country was at, unfortunately, it probably wouldn't have been the most popular decision Trump's ever made. But sometimes doing the right thing is not doing the popular thing, and you have to understand that, especially if you're in elected office. Sometimes what the people want is good, and sometimes what the people want might not be the smartest thing to do. And it drives me crazy to see some of these libertarian types. Listen, I love Thomas Massie. I do. I like a lot of his policies. I was telling someone the other day, Thomas Massie is that guy where on 85% of issues, I'm like, I love this guy, totally the best. And then it's that 15% that sometimes I'm like, brother, what are you doing? What are you doing? Please tell me, what are you doing? And one example is he tweeted out something about how having the police indiscriminately arresting people for carrying firearms without a permit in the city of DC was a horrible thing for the Second Amendment, and that it curtailed the rights of law abiding gun owners. I'm like, okay, I understand the point you're trying to make. I myself am very pro Second Amendment. I like guns, they're nice. However, if we're looking at this situation objectively, the people that are getting arrested for having guns without permits are getting arrested because they are doing a whole lot of other crimes, sometimes with those guns. It's not about the Second Amendment implications and whether or not we should have constitutional carry. I like the idea of constitutional carry. That's not what this is about. This is about getting bad people off the streets who are doing very bad things to other people. Carjackings, thefts, murders. Yeah, no, I don't want them on our streets. So, listen, sure, go ahead, complain into the void about the fact that they're being arrested because they don't have a lawful permit or whatever. Chances are they weren't going to do something good with that gun. They didn't have that gun to just protect themselves. Looking at some of the mugshots and looking at some of the criminal records of these people that have gotten arrested so far, the chances are pretty high that they didn't have that gun for self-protection. They had it for other reasons. So, say what you may, but I think what's going on in DC is a good thing. I think it would be within the country's best interest to expand this project into other areas of the country as well. We have 405 live viewers right now. Wow. I think this is a record. Thank you guys so much. This next week, I believe that I'm going to be streaming at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time just because of school and work. I start my second year of law school on Monday, so that should be fun. um, so we're going to be kicking it back a little bit more, but it seems like these later times, used to I would stream around 6, 7-ish, and it would be lower numbers. It seems like these later times are more convenient for people to tune in and watch, and it seems to be drawing a larger crowd. If you think streaming later in the evening would be a great idea, go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you have any questions for me throughout the duration of this show, go ahead and drop a comment. I'll try to get those questions as we go on, as we're moving along. But as we move along here, we have plenty to talk about tonight. Let's talk about Trump, Russia, and the Ukraine war. So today, Vladimir Putin flew to Alaska to have a meeting, a summit with President Trump to open up peace talks about the war in Ukraine and the situation that was going on there. Ultimately, they did not come to a final decision, final conclusion today, but it seems like there has been a lot of progress made on this front. And just a couple observations I want to make. First off, during the press conference, in which they actually didn't take any questions, they just made statements, Putin, for what I think is the first time in a while, referred to the United States in very friendly terms, calling us neighbors, saying that he sought out a relationship with the United States similar to that we had during the Second World War, a cooperative relationship. Trump echoed some of those. Uh, excuse me. Trump echoed some of those wants, and he also said, we need to have cooperation. We need to have a, friendly relationship with this country. And that's something that I would personally say is I am in total agreement with. Now, before we get into that, Trump said that they made several uh, big moves, and they made a lot of progress today about talking about peace talks. He would have to call some people with NATO. He would have to call some people with Ukraine, call Zelensky, and talk to them about what they talked about. We didn't really get any details about what was discussed during these conferences, but it seemed like it was a productive meeting. It seemed like both sides came out of the room very happy. So we saw earlier in the week in the news that Russia said that they would end the war in exchange for partially the parts of Ukraine that they already occupy, so the Donbass region, Crimea, those areas, keeping Ukraine out of NATO and getting rid of a standing army in Ukraine. Some of these things might be possible, some of these things might not. But ultimately, no matter what happens, it's clear with any ceasefire, unless you just have totally steamroll your opponent, which hasn't happened yet, but there's capability. With any ceasefire agreement and any negotiations, both sides have to give something up. And I've been saying since 2022, I don't think there's a way that you can end this war without Ukraine losing some of its land. I said this last week. You're going to have Ukraine lose some of its land. It's going to happen. And unless you want to get just totally steamrolled, you're going to have to come to the negotiation table willing to make that concession. Now, there's going to be some concessions that Russia's going to have to make as well. It's possible that Ukraine stays out of NATO. I think that would be within everybody's best interest, honestly. However, I don't think that they're going to get. I don't think Ukraine's giving up a standing army. That's something the Russians might have to concede on. But either way, there's going to have to be concessions made on both sides. And ultimately, whatever ends to a peaceful dissolution of this war is going to be in the best interest of everybody, but especially Ukrainian people. If you support Ukraine, you're going to want this war to end because here's the deal. You have thousands of people dying every week. We are to the point now where the Ukrainian army is conscripting old men who are not of fighting age and some young men who are also not of fighting age. Ukraine is in a very bad situation. You wouldn't know it listening to the mainstream media, but if you actually get down to the details and look at what's going on, Ukraine is in a very, very bad situation. It does not look good for them. And what a lot of people My apologies for that delay. As I was saying, Ukraine's in a very bad situation right now. It is not looking good for them at all. Russia fights a war of attrition. They fight a very slow war, draining your resources until they can throw the final punch. That's something a lot of Americans aren't used to. Now, we did have the 20-year-long conflict in the Middle East and Afghanistan, but that was more of an attempted occupation than it was anything else. You look back at like the Gulf War, that thing was over very quickly. You look at the war that just happened with Israel and Iran, that thing was over in 12 days. It wasn't really much of a war, if we're being honest, but give or take. Russia fights very, very slowly. They drain you of resources, and that's what they're doing right now, just waiting for the perfect opportunity where Ukraine is totally depleted. And honestly, this would have happened a long time ago if it wasn't for the fact that money and weapons from Western countries, including the United States, kept going into Ukraine. But if you don't want Ukraine to lose all of its land, if you don't want Ukraine to get totally steamrolled, peace is what you want. You want an end to this war. And unfortunately, what it's going to take is for the war to be brought to a peaceful end, and there are going to have to be concessions. There's going to have to be a ceasefire with concessions. And those concessions are likely going to include some of Ukraine's land being given up. So we will see what happens in the coming days. Hopefully things will be good. And, oh yeah, a point that I made earlier, Trump and Putin both voiced that they wanted there to be friendly cooperation between the United States and Russia. I think that's a good thing. Right now, if we're looking at a geopolitical scale, the United States' largest enemy seems to be China. And our foreign policy over the past decade has been one that has pushed Russia further and further and further into the hands of China. Strengthening the Chinese, this alliance strengthens the Chinese. If you're concerned at all about China's influence, you want to break up that alliance as much as you can. And I think the Russians also want to break up that alliance as much as they can. They don't seem very keen about China as an ally. And so, we don't have to be friends with them. We don't have to be best buds with them. But a strategic alliance with Russia would definitely, in my opinion, be within the best interest of the United States, especially if we think that we're going to end up going to war. I hope that doesn't happen, but if we think we're going to end up going to war with China, yeah, we might want to get Russia on our side and not theirs, because one, if we want to weaken China peacefully, getting Russia on our side, removing that reliance on the Chinese from Russia, getting access to Russian markets, Russian trading, resources from that nation, that's going to be good for us, and that's going to be good for Russia, and it's going to be bad for China. It weakens them. And if for some reason China decides, you know what, screw it, we're going to war, we're invading Taiwan, we're going to do this, that, and the other, we would have a better time fighting that conflict, which I hope doesn't come, but if it does, we would have a better time fighting that conflict with Russia on our side than if they were on the side of the Chinese. I'm just saying, I think a strategic alliance with China, or not with China, a strategic alliance with Russia against China is within our best interest. All right, we are moving quickly tonight. Moving on, I had the privilege earlier of sitting down with William Wolfe, who is the president of the Center for Baptist Leadership. Me and William had a great conversation about the Southern Baptist Convention, and you might be wondering, why should I care about the Southern Baptist Convention? Watch this interview, and you will find out. The religious scene in the country in general, you've probably heard a lot about the Southern Baptist Convention. Recently, the Southern Baptist Convention's policy arm, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Committee, had a resignation at the top. Brent Leverwood, who's been the president for a while, has resigned in the wake of mounting controversies due to his stances on immigration, gun rights, and a whole host of other issues that Southern Baptists care about. But if you're not a Southern Baptist, you might be wondering, why does any of this matter? Why should I care? And if you are a Southern Baptist, you may be wondering, what should I be doing to raise my voice about these things? Here to answer that is the president of the Center for Baptist Leadership and a dear friend, William Wolfe. William, welcome to the Jesse Hughes Show.
Jesse, it's great to be on, man. Thanks for having me.
So I guess the first question is, if somebody's watching this who is a Southern Baptist but isn't tuned in, or is not a Southern Baptist and is wondering what all this is about, they might be wondering, why should I care about any of this at all? What would you say to that?
Yeah, the Southern Baptist Convention, the SBC, is the largest Protestant denomination, if you want to use that word. Sometimes Southern Baptists don't use the word denomination to refer to themselves. Sometimes we just use the word convention, but it's more or less a denomination. So it's the largest Protestant denomination in the United States of America. There are about 40,000 or so Southern Baptist churches, about 13 million or so Southern Baptists in our country. And as we came out of the 20th century, where theological liberalism wrecked the mainline denominations, the Episcopal Church, the Methodist Church, and others like that, the PCUSA, the the Southern Baptist Convention is the last one standing, really. They fought a huge fight in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s to beat back the liberals. It's truly unprecedented in recent American church history. And so it's this massive Christian organization in the United States of America, and the members are largely conservative. Sometimes people talk about evangelicals as the lone bulwark against madness, political madness in this country. And really, those are Southern Baptists. Of course, they're non-denominational folks too, but the heart and soul of what's left of American Protestantism is the Southern Baptist Convention. And so if you care about the future of this country, conservatism, an America that you know, love, and recognize, you should care about the future of the Southern Baptist Convention.
We love our lone bulwarks, don't we, folks?
That's right.
So a lot of people know that the Southern Baptist Convention operates where the congregations themselves are kind of semi-autonomous, and the committee at the top makes decisions, but those decisions don't always necessarily, they might affect or might not affect how certain churches operate. Can you just explain briefly kind of how that system is up for somebody?
Yeah, sure. So they're actually fully autonomous. So the Southern Baptist Convention is a convention of cooperating churches. And that is what makes it different from other denominations that have a hierarchical structure, where the denomination potentially owns the building, the church building itself that you're meeting in. They set very strict doctrinal standards. The denomination itself appoints the ministers or priests or pastors at these different churches. Southern Baptist churches are congregational, autonomous churches who then decide freely to cooperate with the Southern Baptist Convention for the purposes of sending missionaries, theological training. We have 6 seminaries, and our 6 seminaries are some of the largest seminaries in the United States of America, and planting churches. That's really the 3 main things we cooperate on: missions, church planting, theological education, and training of future pastors. But when those churches of their own free will choose to associate with the Southern Baptist Convention to get the benefits, to get access to the International Missions Board, seminary tuition discounts, they say that they are going to have a faith and practice that closely aligns with our Confession of Faith, Baptist Faith and Message 2000. So it's not supposed to be a freelance club. Just any church anywhere doing anything can join the Southern Baptist Convention. You have to look at the Baptist Faith and Message, which contains, Orthodox Christian teaching on the Trinity, on the inerrancy of Scripture, then particularly Baptistic teaching on who should be baptized and things like that. You have to say you agree with it, and then you can join up.
All right. And I think one thing that's been in the news recently is the Southern Baptist Convention has its own policy arm, for lack of a better term. Some people might refer to it as a lobbying group, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. We've seen really that Brent Leverwood, who was, I'm not sure if the correct title was president or executive director, but he was the head of that, recently stepped down. Can you kind of shed some light into who Leverwood is, why he stepped down, and what the ERLC is supposed to do versus what it was doing under his term?
Yeah, sure. So the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, the ERLC, is one of a variety of different official entities that the Southern Baptist Convention has. We have the 6 seminaries, we have the International Missions Board, we have the North American Missions Board, we have Lifeway, which produces Christian resources, and we have the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the ERLC, which is founded ostensibly to defend Southern Baptist interests in the public square, in the political arena, and also to equip Southern Baptist pastors and lay members to think through difficult ethical and moral and political issues of our day. So they're headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, and in Washington, D.C. And they have a president, and that president leads that organization, is really, you could say, sort of the top political spokesperson for Southern Baptists, ethical, moral, political spokesperson. Our most recent president was a guy named Brent Leatherwood, and Leatherwood led the entity for the last 4 years. And his 4 years of leadership was marked by division, controversy, and contention within the life of the Southern Baptist Convention, following on the heels of his predecessor's tenure, somebody that people who listen to your show may know this name, Russell Moore, who was also divisive and contentious. Why? Well, both Moore and Leatherwood are fundamentally never Trumpers. And we're not saying that we need, a full MAGA hat wearing guy to run the ERLC, but the vast majority of Southern Baptists happily voted for President Trump in the last 3 election cycles. So to have a committed constitutional, never Trump top lobbying arm caused a lot of issues. And Brent Leatherwood's tenure in particularly, signing a letter along with national pro-life organizations to work to kill a bill that would have provided equal protection for the unborn in Louisiana. And this was in direct contradiction to a resolution passed at a Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting just the year prior, this is 2021 and 2022, that said Southern Baptists support things like the abolition of abortion, equal protection under the law for the preborn. So he's out of step with us on major issues like ending abortion. He's also out of step with Southern Baptists on other major issues like Second Amendment rights, our right to bear arms, which shall not be infringed. After the terrible, horrific Covenant School shooting in Tennessee, where Leatherwood's children actually attended that school, they were unharmed, but still is a terrible event. Leatherwood used his official position as our political spokesperson to lobby for red flag laws in the state of Tennessee, which many people argue are unconstitutional. And I don't want to go too long here, so I'll mention one more, and then you can ask me for others because I could go all day on this. Sure. He continued to lead the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission in its partnership with the George Soros funded immigration front group called the Evangelical Immigration Table. The Evangelical Immigration Table, or EIT, is part of the National Immigration Forum, which was an organization funded by George Soros, started by George Soros, to try to influence evangelical Christians on immigration policy to make them more supportive of borders policy, increase refugee admissions, amnesty for illegal immigrants, and so on and so forth. Everything that President Trump has run against, won on, and opposes, and the vast majority of clear-thinking Christians oppose as well. Just recently, in the weeks before Leatherwood resigned, he signed on for the ERLC to a coalition letter led by the Evangelical Immigration Table in defense of Representative Maria Salazar's Dignity Act, so-called Dignity Act, which is just another mass amnesty by another name. So on things like abortion and Second Amendment rights and a reasonable, thoughtful, secure border and immigration policy, Leatherwood has been to the left of the vast majority of Southern Baptists. It's a lot of contention in our convention and nomination. That he's
you would think that we would have not only religious leaders at the ERLC, but also politicians that we elect who would actually do the things that we ask them to do instead of running around, what about this amnesty bill? What about gun control? These things sound nice. That's not what that's not, I know my friends, people welcome to the convention, certainly you as well, the people that you know, and you have interacted probably with a lot more than I have. This is not what we want, but it leads to this question in my mind. Look back through history, and we see some of the most prolific cultural fighters in American history in the last 40, 50 years being affiliated with the Baptist Convention. Notable, I'm thinking of being Jerry Falwell, started the Moral Majority, helped get Ronald Reagan elected to office, was stand against the cultural issues of his day, some of which are still around today, like homosexuality, abortion, these hot topic issues. How in the world do we get from the Moral Majority and Jerry Falwell in the 80s to someone leading a policy arm for the most conservative denomination in the country who, by all accounts, from what you're telling us, doesn't even sound like a conservative?
I mean, that is a great question, Jesse. And really what's happened is conservative evangelical Christians find themselves with political leaders who, outside of issues like pro-life and marriage, at best, are to the left of Bill Clinton on so many other issues, on immigration, on climate change, and so on Second Amendment rights and things like that. They're to the left of Bill Clinton. Well, one of the answers can be arguably found in Megan Basham's fantastic book, Shepherds for Sale. the political left, progressives, secular organizations, they saw the success of the moral majority, and they said, this isn't good. If this conservative Christian voting bloc continues to bolster the Republican Party the way that they are now, we'll never be able to take control again. And instead of taking them head on, what a lot of these progressives cooked up was a plan to infiltrate and subvert conservative evangelical Christianity, really taking a page right out of the communist playbook from a couple of decades earlier, where the communists infiltrated, lots of, they infiltrated the federal government, they infiltrated the Christian churches, they infiltrated the seminaries. And so people like George Soros and others, Pierre Omidyar and other progressive billionaires, started funding sort of incursions into conservative evangelicalism and trying to lead us away and fracture us on issues like climate change, immigration, and even on issues like marriage. They wanted us to tone down our defense of biblical marriage between a man and a woman, the only type of marriage there ever is. And really one of the biggest hooks, Jesse, over the last decade was racial issues, was wokeness. When BLM sort of hit the airwaves, that's when they saw an opportunity to shame us for our racist past and get us to sort of, prostrate ourselves before the altar white guilt and everything that came along with it. So it's been intentional. It's been a multi-year effort, really, because evangelical Christians in this current generation were asleep at the wheel in regards to the political plays being run on them.
It's insane to see. So you started, in the wake of some of all this controversy that's been going on, you started an organization called the Center for Baptist Leadership. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Center for Baptist Leadership, we aim to defend it from those who seek its destruction, which there are many people who want to see the Southern Baptist Convention either go liberal or go woke or go bankrupt or all three if possible, and to equip Baptists to be a better voice in the public square. And so really, if you've read Megan's book and you say, I think this is a problem, organizations like the Center for Baptist Leadership and American Reformer, which helped launch the Center for Baptist Leadership, we're trying to be a solution to that. We're trying to make sure that we stay theologically faithful to God's word in our theology and in our practice as Southern Baptist Convention churches, advocate for better governance of our Southern Baptist Convention entities, which are stewarding fundamentally $5 from millions of Southern Baptists across this country. And then again, to really get Baptists, out of the pews and back into the public square. We've heard so many stats and anecdotes about how few Christians actually vote. But it's not just voting, it's also intellectual, theological, and philosophical leadership to be provided to the conservative movement in America. In many ways, Protestants have been supplanted by Roman Catholics in terms of the leadership of the conservative movement within the Republican Party in the United States of America. And I'm thankful for the conservative Catholics, great arena, but fundamentally, this was a Protestant country, and it's America is really a Protestant birthright, and Baptists play a big role in that. So we're trying to bring Baptists back into the public square while Southern Baptist Convention.
I love my Catholic brother, but I think if this, it would feel like we've lost something a little bit if this country, in my opinion, became a Catholic country instead of remaining Protestant. But with all of that in mind, just moving forward a little bit, so we've seen there have been over the years multiple attempts, some by Tom Maskell, a guy that you and I both respect, others who tried to either eliminate the ERLC through votes at the annual meeting or through different means. Obviously, they've gotten some sort of message now that we've seen that Leverwood has resigned. So going forward, do you foresee a new president being put in charge who's actually going to the organization in a more conservative direction, or do you think that they're going to try and find somebody who is maybe more non-controversial and would just kind of sit by while groups like yours hopefully do end up taking the lead, do just sit by and getting Southern Baptists to actually get up and get back to our friends at the Standing for Freedom protest.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, fundamentally, to change the Southern Baptist Convention in either direction, if you want to make it more liberal, you want to make it more conservative, you have to win the presidency of the Southern Baptist Convention quite a few years in a row, because it's through the presidency that you get a committee on nominations. The nominations committee appoints trustees or offers trustees to the messengers to vote on to be approved to these boards that govern these entities, the seminaries, the ERLC, all of it. Tom Askell and other brothers have run for the presidency, but really got our first conservative president in quite a while, and this guy, Clint Presley, a little over a year ago in 2024. So thinking about changing the Southern Baptist Convention and changing the ERLC, year one was just last year. Just started year two. So it's going to take a while. So Leatherwood actually suffered a huge defeat in a vote that we took at the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting just a couple months ago in Dallas, where 43% of the messengers who were gathered there voted affirmatively to abolish the ERLC because it's been so divisive and out to lunch and out of step. Now, he technically survived the vote, 57-43, but it was a huge referendum, and I think that's sort of what led to his resignation. So will we get a better president? That's what you're asking me, and I'm answering it by saying I'm not sure, because allowed Russell, the board of trustees that allowed Brent Leatherwood to be doing what he was doing, hasn't fundamentally changed yet. They actually say the search committee that was formed to pursue looking for a new president. I don't know those people personally, but it does not inspire confidence that it's some sort of rock-ribbed conservative search committee. And so I'd say at best here, Jesse, with this current board, we'll get somebody who will not be as controversial, not be as, offensive to conservative Southern Baptists, but won't really be pushing hard to the right. At worst, we'll get the 2.0, 3.0. And outside of the question, quite frankly, that could still happen. It's somebody who's just as bad as both of them back in the position, and we'll be back in the position we were in, voting to get rid of them in a couple of years here again. So still, as a Christian, I want to hope for the best, trust in God's sovereignty. And, we'll see, it's not that hard. I will close this little answer by saying this. It's not that hard to be a decent president of the ERLC. Get out of the evangelical immigration table. Stop pushing amnesty. Stop lobbying bills of equal protection at the state level. Get your name off Twitter. Stop taking progressive money and focus on the main things that you've been created to do: advancing religious liberty, fighting for life, and helping Southern Baptist churches navigate these difficult political waters.
Absolutely. All right, we have a few more minutes left. So just moving on a little broader, what are some of the issues that you're focusing on in the lead up to the next annual convention that Southern Baptists should be paying attention to, people outside the convention should be paying attention to, and that you hope to see some movement or some traction on in the coming months?
And it's engagement. I'm actually looking at engagement, and by that I mean send your messengers to the annual meeting. Our last few annual meetings, 10% of all Southern Baptist churches have voted. One church is out. Second, other major convention will allow female pastors. Our statement of faith says that we don't. Not convention. There are people out there who support egalitarianism, support female pastors, that I can partner with on political things outside of the SBC. But in the SBC, we say that we think the Bible is only men can be pastors. So that's something we're still fighting on. Another one would be financial transparency. We don't have standard non-profit standards, 990 level financial reporting for our entities, and we're trying to get that so people know fundamentally how their tithe dollars are being stewarded. And the last thing would be going to be a so-called open election for the next president. Clint Presley is in the second year of his 2 consecutive terms here, and so who we pick next or Clint will really help shape the direction. Clint's been a great pause and sort of a reversal of the liberal drift. But we're going to be looking for the next president to be somebody who really wants to go pedal to the metal on fixing the issues in the Southern regions. Come vote for financial transparency, deal with egalitarianism, and vote for a great conservative president after Clinton.
Those are all super important. One little comment I've been thinking about. I know that at the last annual meeting, when the fight over female pastors got brought up, I believe it's Jeff York, or however you say his last name, stood up there and said something about, well, we consulted with our lawyers, and they think that we're opening ourselves up to unnecessary litigation if we pass something like this. I'm in law school. I'm not even a lawyer yet. I'm in law school. I have not even taken the bar yet. And I know enough about the law so far to know that as a religious denomination, holding to our own beliefs is constitutionally protected. Give me 15 minutes, I'll give some case law on it. You need to fire whoever gave you that advice and get better lawyers. That in particular kind of just drove me crazy. But where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about this stuff?
Thanks, Jesse. And you're absolutely right. And can you imagine Martin Luther saying, I can't defend God's word because the lawyers told me not to? Ridiculous. Follow us online on X at Baptist Leaders. Find us on Facebook, Center for Baptist Leadership. Please subscribe to our podcast, particularly on YouTube. We're trying to grow our reach there. YouTube, Center for Baptist Leadership, and check out our website at centerforbaptistleadership.org. If you haven't caught the theme, you can find us using the phrase Center for Baptist Leadership.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Jesse.
Wolfe, there we go. So that was my interview with William Wolfe, Executive Director of the Center for Baptist Leadership. William is a great friend. Thank you for coming on. On my end, I noticed some internet connection issues. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but in case you did, a full version of that interview without any internet delays or anything of that nature will be posted to both my YouTube, Rumble, X, all of those accounts in the coming days shortly. So if there were some issues with the stream, I apologize. That will be remedied shortly, and you can find the interview in its full at those locations. But we are getting close to time here, so I just wanted to end with something a little bit fun. So, we've been talking about Trump federalizing D.C. needs to be done. We've been talking about the war in Ukraine coming to an end, needs to be done. We just had our conversation with William about getting better representation in the Southern Baptist Convention, especially with the ERLC, needs to be done. So now we're going to talk about something that's a little less important than those issues, but also something that needed to be done, but didn't get done. And I'm, of course, talking about the decision handed down by the NCAA today against Michigan football. I might lose some of you here. I like sports. I like talking about them. It's a fun little topic. I just wanted to talk about this for a second, get some thoughts off my chest. So in case you missed it, in 2023, huge scandal with Michigan football over supposed sign stealing with Connor Stallions. Jim Harbaugh was placed on suspension during a game. There was a lot of buzz about it, a lot of buzz in the aftermath after they won their national title. Will the NCAA lay the hammer down? Will they strip Michigan of its national title? Will they do this? Will they do that? Well, the NCAA released its decision today. And basically its decision is that they're going to have to give up a certain amount of their revenue. They're going to have to give up a certain number of recruiting hours. There's actually a 14-week ban or probation on talking to recruits, on recruit communication for the program. That one might hurt a little bit, but the rest of these things, they're not that... What is this? Come on, bro, what is this? Listen. The whole sign stealing thing, I don't think is that big of a deal necessarily, just because everybody kind of does it to an extent. It's not a unique thing to Michigan. That being said, the NCAA played this up like it was the worst thing that's ever happened in football, and like they were going to drop this like monumental decision on Michigan. And the only reason that they claimed they didn't is because they didn't want to punish current players who weren't even on the team when the coaches made the decision, this and that. And listen, I understand that. I get it. I kind of do. But either be impactful or don't. Because this punishment is not impactful. All right, listen. If you think that this is the worst thing in the world, then okay, then why didn't you do more? Strip them of the national title. Get as close to the death penalty as you can without actually giving them the death penalty. Like, do something. But in the NCAA, in its infinite ineffectiveness, decided that this was the best course of action. And listen, again, I get it. But at the same time, people are questioning your existence, NCAA. Listen to me. People are questioning whether you should even be around anymore. The SEC and the Big Ten, for anyone that has eyes, are getting ready to jump ship and start their own league for college football. Nobody thinks that you matter anymore. And you know this. I know you know this. And if you know that nobody thinks you matter anymore, what better way to actually signal, yeah, we still matter, hey, you still need to listen to us, than actually dropping the hammer and doing something more than whatever this thing was that you did against Michigan football. Listen, if you're a Michigan fan, I'm not trying to make you mad, I'm not trying to piss you off, but I'm just saying, like, the NCAA was claiming to take this seriously. I don't believe that. And I don't think anyone actually takes the NCAA that seriously, especially not after this. If you wanted to keep yourself relevant, to me, this is the NCAA saying, we see the writing on the wall. We're not a relevant institution anymore. We're going to pretend to still be relevant just so that we can try and stay in the conversation, but we know in 5 years. Dude, what are you doing? Do something. Like, actually do something instead of whatever this was, because that was pathetic. Cheers. All right, guys, I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Jesse Hughes Show. We will be back next week, Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you guys can tune in live for that. It's going to be a great time. I can't wait. This will be up on Spotify tomorrow. If you want to listen to an audio only version, clips will be coming up throughout the week. The full interview with William will be released independently in its entirety later on in the week. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Thank you so very much. All 591 of you. Good grief, that's a record. Thank you to all of you for joining tonight. I hope you have a tremendous night, tremendous weekend. God loves you, and so do I. Thank you. God bless you all, and have a great night.